The wind howled low through the collapsed ruins of Outpost 9. Metal frames groaned, half buried beneath the dust of war and time. Most called this place dead, a graveyard of machines and broken people. But Riven knew better. He crouched beside a twisted bulkhead, filtering through the ash for spare parts. His scanner blinked softly in his visor, pinging faint biometrics ahead. Another dead drone? He muttered, brushing soot from a scorched circuit plate. Then he heard it, a cough. Not mechanical. Human. Riven stood slowly. The ash drifted around him like slow-falling snow. The signal blinked again, stronger. He stepped over the rubble, boots crunching glass, heart hammering. Nobody lived this deep in the wastes, no one sane anyway. And yet, there she was, curled. Beside a rusted stanchion half covered in tarp and grime was a girl, frail, skeletal. Her skin dusted gray from soot. One eye fluttered open, hollow, tired, and too large for her gaunt face. Helper. Riven stared. Her voice was dry as paper. He could see the outlines of her ribs. Tubes dangled from her wrists, medical in origin, but cut. She had been left here, discarded, thrown away. He crouched. Hey, you're alive. Stay with me. She blinked once, slowly. You're not from the clinic. No, I'm a scavenger. Name's Riven. Can you move? She gave a weak shake of her head. He hesitated. She was clearly sick, maybe terminal. Infection, radiation, bio-waste. But her eyes locked onto his, steady despite the trembling. There was something in them, not desperation, but defiance. I don't want to die here, she whispered. Riven swallowed. Then you won't. His shack wasn't much, nestled in the side of a crumbling terradome, but it had heat, clean water, and a med pod that still half worked. Riven carried her the entire way, her weight barely more than his pack. He didn't ask her name until she could speak without coughing blood. Why'd you bring me back? She asked from the cot, weeks later. Her voice had strength now. The bruises under her eyes had faded, and though her limbs were still thin, she was sitting upright. Riven shrugged, checking a power node on the wall. Didn't seem right, leaving someone like that. I was a lab subject, she said bluntly. A failed one. He didn't flinch. I figured. She stared at him. He finally turned to meet her gaze. You were still human. Her eyes welled up. No one else thought so. They never meant to get close. At first, it was necessity: meals, repairs, her rehab. She had to learn to walk again. He reinforced her joints with scrap servo braces, made from salvaged skyhatch hinges. She laughed when she walked 5 steps. Without falling, he laughed to. Her name was Cell. Not much else came at first. She didn't remember her last name or where she was born. Most of her memory was fragmented, sliced by the neural stabilizers implanted during experimentation. But she remembered feelings, the cold of metal tables, the burn of injections, the sound of others crying down the hallway of the lab. I was engineered, she told him one night while watching the stars beyond the cracked dome ceiling. But my body rejected it, so they threw me out, said I was defective. You're not, Riven said. I know that now, she whispered. 3 months passed. Cell grew stronger. Her color returned. She danced. Once, in the rain, thin arms raised, feet bare in the soot. Riven watched her from the doorway. Something inside him twisted. He wasn't a soft man. The wastes didn't allow that. But Cell changed things. She hummed when she cleaned. She left him scrap art figures near his tools. She curled up in the corner of the shack every night, and, slowly, without asking, she started sharing his bedroll. Nothing happened at first. Just warmth, the presence of another body, the slow breathing that told him he wasn't alone. Then, one night, she kissed him. It was hesitant, soft, but full of intent. I'm not broken, she whispered, lips brushing his ear. He kissed her, back, fiercely. Their nights changed after that. What started as gentle turned into hunger, to people starved of touch, of affection, of the right to simply be held. She traced his scars with her lips. He ran his hands down her spine, counting every healed vertebra. They didn't speak of the future, not yet. The wastes never promised tomorrow. But in that rusted little shack, surrounded by war debris and forgotten tech, they created a world all their own. Then came the morning she didn't rise. Riven found her curled in the cot, eyes fluttering. Cell? She groaned and held her stomach. Something feels different. Panic struck him. You're not relapsing. No, she whispered. She looked at him with wide eyes, tearful but smiling. I think I'm pregnant. Riven froze. His mind scrambled for logic. The experiments, her biology. Was this possible? I thought I couldn't. I shouldn't be able to, she said softly. But he knelt beside her. Her hand slipped into his. I don't care how, he said. If it's true, we'll figure it out. She cried then, shaking sobs. That soaked his shoulder. I was supposed to die, she said. But now I have life inside me. He kissed her forehead. You are life, Cell. The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. A steady drumbeat on the tin roof. A rhythm that had once felt lonely now pulsed in harmony with her breathing. The girl, the one the city had thrown out with a tag around her ankle that read discard no. Recovery, now slept curled up beneath layers of blankets in the small farmhouse. On the edge of nowhere. He didn't know her name. She hadn't spoken yet. But she watched him now. And she touched her belly often, as if trying to understand the life growing inside. He found her standing in the doorway on the 4th morning, hair still tangled, bones still far too visible beneath the skin. But her eyes, they were no longer hollow. They were watching the sunrise. You should be resting, he said gently, setting a mug of broth on the windowsill. She didn't speak, but she stepped back inside and took the cup with both hands. It wasn't much, but it was something. When she first arrived, she couldn't hold down a spoon of rice. Her body trembled constantly. Nightmares shattered her sleep, and she'd wake choking on her own breath, eyes wide like she was back somewhere darker. He never asked what they did to her. Not yet. Some pains were like seeds buried too deep. You couldn't dig them up too early, or they wouldn't bloom into anything at all. Her voice came on the 7th day. It wasn't a name. It wasn't even a full sentence. He was tending to the solar panel battery box behind the house when he heard her call. Why? He turned slowly, not wanting to scare her. She stood at the door again, her hands pressed to her stomach. Why did you take me? The wind blew softly through the broken fields. He straightened. Because you were still breathing, he said. She stared at him, eyes flickering, mouth parted. That's all, she whispered. He shook his head. That's where it started. By the 12th day, she was walking with him to the well, not far. Just enough to stretch. She held her back carefully, one hand still instinctively protectively over her abdomen. Her illness hadn't left her completely. Her legs still ached. Her skin still paled too easily, but she had color again. And she smiled when the wind played with her hair. Not at him, not yet, but at the sky. He told her stories sometimes, as they walked, about his mother who taught him to carve whistles from bark, about the fox that stole half his winter stockpile once, about the time the city men tried to conscript him, and he'd played dead to avoid it. She listened, silently, but her footsteps began to match his pace. The first time she touched him was on accident. He tripped slightly while hauling a full bucket, and she reached out without thinking to steady his arm. He paused. She didn't pull away. Sorry, she said softly. He smiled. Don't be. She let go slowly, and he noticed her fingers lingered just a second longer than needed. That night, she asked for his name. Riven, he said. She nodded. Then whispered, Anne. He looked at her. Is that your name? She nodded again. He swallowed. That's beautiful. She smiled, just faintly. One evening, a tremor hit the valley. Not large, just enough to rattle the windows and make the goats cry. But Anne froze in the middle of washing her hands. Her shoulders went rigid. Her breathing stopped. Riven stepped forward slowly, calling her name. She didn't hear. She sank to her knees, hands still dripping water. He knelt beside her and didn't speak. He just put one hand on her back and waited. Eventually, she gasped. Then wept. And leaned into him without a word. They sat there on the floor until the water ran cold. By the next week, she was helping him plant. She wore gloves, not because the soil hurt her hands, but because she still flinched at sudden noises. The birds overhead made her duck at times. The wind rustling the trees made her tense. But she stayed. She moved among the rows of earth, pressing seeds into the dirt. A quiet strength bloomed inside her now, One day, she held her back with a wince and whispered, "He's kicking." Riven turned, surprised. And nodded. I feel him." She placed his hand over her belly, and for the first time, her fingers didn't tremble against his skin. They sat by the fire one night, her belly rounding softly beneath a borrowed sweater. "You don't have to stay here forever," Riven said gently. "If there's anywhere you want to go when you're strong enough, I'll help you." She looked at him for a long time. Then she whispered, "I want to stay." He blinked. "With me?" he asked. She looked down, her cheeks coloring. "I don't want to run anymore," she said. "I don't want him to grow up not knowing someone kind." She met his eyes. "I don't want to forget what safety feels like," and slept against his shoulder that night, the flicker of the fire glowing softly across her hair. Riven didn't move. His eyes stayed open long after sleep claimed her, because something else had bloomed inside him to Dot, and it was terrifying. And beautiful. The peace didn't last. Nothing ever did. It began with the sound of engines. Not the tractor kind, not local. Military. Riven froze as the sound echoed over the hills. Anne, standing by the fence, went pale. She turned to him slowly, hands shaking. "They're coming back," she whispered. He ran to her, caught her shoulders. "Who?" he demanded. "They marked me," she said. "They never let the sick ones go free. They test them, breed them, then dispose of the ones that don't comply." He felt the world tilt. "You didn't tell me. I didn't want to lose this," she whispered, clutching her belly. "Or you." He cursed under his breath, then grabbed her hand. "We're not staying here." They left everything behind that night. Food, tools, even the carved rocking chair he'd made. They took only what mattered, each other, and the unborn child. They fled through the forest trails, and gasping through the pain of running, holding her belly protectively, Riven didn't let go of her hand. Behind them, lights glowed in the valley, harsh artificial beams that didn't belong to stars. But up ahead, the woods deepened. Safe. Silent. Alive. They hid in a cave that first night, Riven building a fire from memory alone, and curled beside him, shaking, and he wrapped his arms around her without hesitation. "We keep running if we have to," he said softly. "I'm not letting them take you, either of you," and wept quietly into his chest. "I never asked for this," she whispered. "I know, but I never dreamed I could be happy." He kissed her forehead. "You're not just alive anymore," he whispered. "You're mine, and somewhere beyond the trees, far beyond the reach of cold cities and their experiments, something new had begun. Not just survival, but love, and the promise of a family forged from ruin." The rain had turned the garden soil to thick, clinging mud. From the back porch, he watched her kneel under the dripping canopy of the fig tree. Her fingers curled in the wet earth as though she was trying to plant roots of her own. She shouldn't be able to walk. She shouldn't be upright. She shouldn't even be alive. But she was, and she was glowing. Literally, sometimes. He still didn't know her name. She hadn't said it once since the day he found her in that overflowing medical waste bin. She had no ID, no memory, no history she could share. Her body had been ravaged by engineered disease, military-grade biotech viruses that targeted only those with certain DNA profiles. But she didn't just survive. She changed. He remembered the exact moment he realized something was different. He'd woken to the scent of ozone and lavender. Her fever had broken. Her skin had turned golden, not metaphorically, but visibly. A pearlescent shimmer beneath her flesh, and her eyes, once dull gray, now shimmered with violet fire. When she looked at him, she was something new. And now, she was pregnant. "You should rest," he called to her from the porch. She turned her head. That slow feline movement she'd started doing in the last 2 weeks. "I'm not fragile. I didn't say you were. You're thinking it." He chuckled and stepped down into the garden, sloshing toward her. Her feet were bare in the mud. The soil clung to her ankles like bracelets. She was pressing seeds into the earth, methodically, precisely, like she could feel where they needed to go. "I'm not trying to control you," he said gently. She paused, then held out a dirty hand. He took it. "I know," she murmured. "That's why I stay." The child growing inside her wasn't ordinary. They'd found that out a week ago when he took her for a scan in the hidden part of the forest, where the old war clinic machines still worked. The ultrasound lit up with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed back in response to the machine. The AI running the scanner had shut itself down mid-scan, muttering a warning in code. Something about anomaly in genetic sequence incompatible with existing databases. The child was alive, certainly, but also alien, or maybe post-human. And he couldn't stop thinking about what they'd done to her before he found her. "Do you remember them?" he asked later that night, as they lay side by side under the tattered solar blanket in the attic bedroom. She was curled against him, her ear to his chest, listening to his heartbeat like it anchored her. Her fingers played idly with the hem of his shirt. "I remember screams," she said finally, "and lights, and pain." Her hand moved to her belly, and then silence, like the world gave up on me. He kissed her hair. "I didn't." She tilted her head up to him. "That's why this child chose you." 3 days later, the scouts came. He heard the whirring before he saw the black gliders, sleek, silent wings cutting through the tree line like knives. They hadn't flown this deep into the exclusion zone in months. He cursed and ran inside. She was already at the window, eyes blazing. "They're looking for me," she said simply. "I figured. I need to go." "No." He blocked the door. "They'll take you back. Finish whatever they started. They won't catch me. I won't lose you." She blinked, startled. Then, slowly, she smiled. That night, the air crackled with tension. He couldn't sleep. Every twig snapped. Every flutter of wings outside sent him reaching for the pulse rifle hidden under the floorboard. She sat by the window, still as a statue, watching the dark like it would yield answers. Around midnight, she stood. "I need to show you something," she whispered. He followed her barefoot into the woods, down the hidden trail that led to the salt spring. The trees seemed to part for her. The moonlight painted silver on her skin. When they reached the spring, she knelt and placed her palms on the ground. "Watch," she said. The earth hummed, and then the water turned gold. "I'm not what they made me," she said, her voice low. "I'm what came after." He stared, heart hammering. "You're evolving?" "No," she said, eyes aglow. "I'm remembering." She looked up at him, her voice trembling. "My kind doesn't die. We shed. The pain, the weakness, the body that was hurt. I thought I was broken, but I was just becoming. And the child is the first of the next, and it chose you, too." They kissed by the glowing spring. The air warmed despite the cold night. She pressed his hands to her belly. "It's not just mine," she whispered. "It's ours." Something in him shattered and healed in the same breath. He knelt. Not because she was divine, though she glowed like a god. Not because she was powerful, though she'd melted war tech with her bare hands. But because she was his, and he was hers. But peace never lasts. At dawn, the gliders returned. Not just scouts this time. They dropped pulse grenades on the garden, burned the fig tree, torched the soil she'd blessed with her hands. He grabbed his rifle. She stopped him. "No more running," she said. "They'll take you." "They can't, not anymore." And she walked out into the smoke. They fired on her. She raised her hand, and the bullets stopped midair, spun. And returned. The men screamed. Machines exploded. Flames bent away from her like afraid children. And in that moment, he saw it clearly. She wasn't a survivor. That she was the storm later when the smoke cleared. She stood in the garden, barefoot, belly round, glowing. He joined her silently. "They'll keep coming," she said. "Then we'll build something stronger." She turned to him. I chose you too," he said. And this time, when she smiled, it was radiant. The rains hadn't stopped in 3 days, not the soft kind that washed the trees gently, but the kind that scoured the land, flooded the craters, and tore the loose metal sheeting off the roof with a scream. Lightning danced above the tree line. The house stood firm, but inside, something ancient stirred. She sat on the floor, cross-legged, surrounded by candles that never melted. The child inside her pulsed in rhythm with the storm. Her golden skin flickered with every lightning strike, and when she opened her eyes, they didn't reflect the flame they created it. "They're close," she whispered. He didn't need to ask who. He'd seen the black fire trails in the sky, sleek. Warships, newer than any tech he'd grown up around. had entered the exclusion zone without even triggering the perimeter alarms. The zone had let them through, which meant they weren't just after her. They were after the child. "I can hide you both," he said. She shook her head. "You don't understand. They're not here to take. They're here to worship." He blinked. "Worship." She stood, slowly, her hand brushing her swollen belly. "They sent destroyers because they think they're prepared, but they don't understand what's been born here." The first team arrived just after dawn. Black armor, breathing masks, weapons that hummed with silent readiness. They didn't speak. They fanned out, scanning the land with light that pierced the soil and read the code in the roots. He watched from the barn loft, his old rifle pressed to his chest. She stood in the open, barefoot in the mud, waiting. "Target acquired," one of the soldiers said. "Repeat, the host is visible. Confirm engagement." He wanted to shoot, wanted to yell, but she had told him to trust her. "We don't harm the host," said another voice over the comm. "We kneel." The men froze. One by one, they dropped to their knees. She stepped forward, the rain evaporating before it touched her. Her eyes glowed like dying suns. The ground beneath her feet shimmered, not with heat, but with memory. And then she spoke, not in his language, not in any language he knew, but the trees leaned in to hear it. The clouds spun tighter. And the soldiers wept. "They were made to destroy me," she said later, back inside the house, her voice soft against the storm's rage. "But their ancestors once served my kind. They carry that in their bones. Your kind." He started. She placed a hand on his chest. "Our kind now. You were meant to forget. I was meant to die. But the child inside me rewrote both of us." He couldn't argue. He didn't want to. "So what do we do now?" She smiled. "We teach them. By the 5th day." The ships above the forest didn't circle. They hovered. Not in threat. In reverence. Communiques came, encrypted and laced with strange honorifics. Mother returned. Seed bearer. The flame of Gene Zero. He listened to them on the battered console in the attic, filtering transmissions through a cracked screen. They spoke of old myths, a prophecy that began before humans were human, of a last-born host carrying the child that would wake the first language. She didn't confirm or deny it. She simply said, "Let them come. But they do not get to take her." She nodded. "Our daughter. She told me last night." They built a perimeter of light around the clearing. Not weapons. Not fences. Trees. Towering, silver-barked trees that had not grown there the day before. He asked her if she had done it. She said she did. And when he touched the bark, he heard a heartbeat. One of the ship captains asked for an audience. They came alone, unarmed and barefoot. A woman with lines on her face and eyes that didn't blink like human ones. She bowed before the child's mother. "We thought we could forge a future without the root," she said. "But the root lives in you." In her, she held out a data crystal. Inside were coordinates, star maps, names of worlds he had never heard, all marked in green. "They are ready to receive her," the captain said. The child's mother smiled. "She is not here to rule you." "No," said the captain. "She is here to remind us who we were." He sat on the porch that evening, watching the glow of the trees. She came to him, curling up in his lap like she always did, though her belly made it awkward now. "You still want to stay with me?" he asked. "I was never leaving, but you could be out there, among the stars, worshipped." She kissed his neck. "I want to be home." That night, the child kicked, the house filled with light, and all the soldiers outside dropped their weapons and began to sing. The storm had not stopped for days. Clouds churned like wounded beasts across the sky. Lightning struck the old sea wall again and again, as if trying to carve through memory. The wind sang in a voice that sounded almost human, low and mourning, while the rain came down in sheets, like a second ocean had overturned above. She stood in the doorway of the old sanctuary barefoot, soaked, unblinking. In her arms, the child pulsed with something ancient, not a human heartbeat, not anything medical instruments could track. But every time she touched her, she felt it, a steady thrum, like a tectonic rhythm sensing with breath. The storm child had arrived. No name had been given to the baby, not by her, not by the winds. It didn't seem right to label something that had changed the shape of the world. The villagers whispered different things now: demon, guardian, god, ghost. But none dared come close anymore. She remembered how it had started. The man who had taken her in, who had not asked questions about the blood or the limp in her step, or the foreign marks on her spine. He had only looked at her, and not turned away. He hadn't survived the lightning that struck the mountain during her 3rd trimester. She had screamed his name to the sky, not understanding why he had gone silent, but the sky had answered, hadn't it, and never stopped answering since. The child was born during thunder, eyes wide, unblinking, not crying, watching Dot, and from that moment, nothing had been the same. You can't stay here. She turned slowly, seeing the old monk standing behind her. His robe was soaked through, hood thrown back, his bald head gleaming with rain. But his eyes were kind, tired, not afraid, only tired. I have nowhere else, she said quietly. This sanctuary is ancient, he replied, but not strong enough to contain her, or shield the world from her. She looked down at the child. The baby watched the monk as if evaluating his soul. Then where should we go? The monk didn't answer. Right away. Then, with hands rough from years of candle wax and prayer, he reached inside his cloak and pulled out a scroll. She had seen them before, in the underground halls where ancient rites were sealed from outsiders. You take her to the place where the first storm was born, before words, before gods. It's written here. She took the scroll with trembling fingers. The child reached up and brushed it. Thunder roared. They traveled by night. The world had grown hostile, not by choice but by fear. Her presence warped wind patterns. Forests bent unnaturally in her path. Birds circled in spirals above them. Machines failed. Radios emitted screams. And yet, the baby never cried, only stared, always stared. There was a moment, 2 weeks into the journey, when they crossed into the salt basin of the northern marshes. There, a group of men in military gear waited, not with weapons drawn but kneeling, waiting. They didn't speak. She stepped forward, the child in her arms. One of the soldiers, helmet off, spoke with awe and something like heartbreak. We thought you were a myth. She said nothing. The child blinked once. A gust of wind blew from nowhere. Every man fell flat to the mud. They did not rise until she had passed. At the edge of the world was the rift, not a canyon, not a cave, a split. Like the planet had been cut once and the wound had refused to close. The sky grew violet above it, stars swirling faster than natural laws allowed. The scroll had led her true. She stood at the edge, and for the first time, the baby stirred in discomfort. Not pain, not fear, discomfort, like waking from a dream. What do you want me to do? She whispered. No answer came from the sky. Instead, the baby raised her arms and touched the air. It tore. Light poured through, not white, not golden, something raw, like the color of the first dawn, the birth of time, a memory too old for language. The earth shook. And from the light, figures stepped through. They were not human, but not foreign. Tall, cloaked in translucent shimmer, their faces constantly shifting, older than stars, yet familiar, like ancestors you never met, yet remembered in your blood. One of them knelt. You returned her. She felt herself step back. I didn't know. You carried her across the dying breath of your world. You bled for her. You fed her. You looked into her eyes and did not flinch. Another spoke, voice like wind through reeds. We did not think your kind capable of love like that. The baby reached toward them, then paused, looked back at her. She nodded. The child turned and stepped into the light. The storm stopped. Just like that. Skies cleared. Clouds softened. Winds died. And she fell to her knees, exhausted, empty, but not alone. The tallest of the figures remained, came to her, knelt. She chose to return. But you must understand, her coming changed the weave of your world. Her leaving will too. She blinked through tears. What happens now? The figure smiled, vaguely maternal. Now, it begins. A year later, the sea bloomed with flowers. The old forests bore fruit never seen before. Lightning never struck without warning. Children born after that night had dreams of a glowing girl who watched them from beyond the clouds. And once, during a quiet twilight, She saw her again standing at the edge of the lake, barefoot in the mist dottled her. Smiling, she ran to her. The girl embraced her, not a child anymore, but still hers, and when she spoke, the words were warm thunder. "Thank you for giving me a name."